Wayward Courier, Chapter 8. Let me tell you, people take low-light optics for granted. I could barely see 3 feet in front of me without these damn things. Seeing the dogs had started to throw spears, I'm glad. The whole set of caverns was illuminated barely by gems sticking out of the walls, apparently perfectly natural there. We were particularly led there by those dogs attacking us. That's what I don't get. I managed to tear through at least 15 of those damn things. Why did their bodies think they stood any sort of a chance? I was on my last magazine for my submachine gun before we found them, and of course they were guarded. 2 dogs for each pony. There was no way I could just shoot my way through that situation. Odds were I hit one of them even with VATS. The mare could only watch as her human companion blazed a trail of bloody destruction through the diamond dogs, as though they were made of paper. Each one had ruthlessly, effortlessly killed, dodging around the spears that were sent in his direction with ease. Somehow, the entire situation was made worse by the fact that he didn't even seem to see the corpses walking on them and over them, as though they weren't there. She was just glad that she couldn't barely see in the gloom. She was sure that her nightmares would be filled with these images and that being able to actually see them would actually make them worse. Twilight didn't know how many the courier had eliminated, but they eventually found what they came for, down into the caves to find. Her heart sank at what she saw. The 3 fillies were there, along with 6 diamond dogs. The fillies themselves were locked behind the barred doors, covered in dirt and cuts. Twilight? Apple Bloom asked, timidly. One of her eyes had been swollen shut, and she was holding a leg awkwardly. Is that you? The unicorn could almost feel the courier shaking with rage beside her. They hurt them? They fucking hurt them? He dropped his weapon and pulled the other sleeker off of his back. They're gonna pay, he growled. Wait, Twilight said, hoping to halt his murderous rampage. We should try talking first. The courier seemed to glance at her. Try if you want. I think we're past that, though, he replied harshly. They try anything? I'll have a few new coats. The mare couldn't stop herself from shivering at the way he said that. She couldn't help but wonder just who was the bigger threat here, the dogs or him. She cleared her throat and turned to the dogs. Let the fillies go, and we won't hurt you. The diamond dogs laughed. Let them go? One of them asked. Little ponies work for us now, replied another in the gloom. She had a little trouble identifying the speaker. Hey, the orange Pegasus filly, Scootaloo, yelled out. We don't work for no pony. The dog nearest to her shoved the butt of his spear through the door and slammed her in the face with it. As she rolled away, holding a hoof to her nearest bruise, there was a loud bang and a yelp of intense pain. Twilight turned to see the courier looking down the scope of his weapon, the small metal barrel smoking slightly. She followed the line of sight and was horrified to see that one of the diamond dogs, the one that had just struck Scootaloo, was clutching a leg that seemed to have exploded. Even in the gloom, she was sure that she could see bone between the dog's claws. The next one to hurt one of those girls isn't getting back up again, he said mercilessly, forgetting that Twilight was the only one who could understand him. Understandably, the diamond dogs were scared. The strange being, clothed in armor unlike anything they have seen ever, and wielding a weapon of frightening power, had just incapacitated one of them with minimal effort. They couldn't understand what he had just said, but they didn't have to. His tone said it all. I will kill each and every one of you. As one, they all agreed to do the reasonable thing. One of them opened the door to the cell that the fillies were in as the rest lowered their spears. "Go," one of them said. "Leave, and take the monster with you," another growled. All it took to get them free was to horrifiedly maim one of their captors and slaughter the ones in the way. Quite honest, it was a lot easier than I was used to. Typically, things would end with me covered in blood and the hostages close to death. Twilight still carried them out, though at least 2 of them were too injured to walk on their own, and they were too tired anyway. It's probably a good thing it was so dark in these caves. I think the last thing such innocent children needed to see were bodies. And that's the thing. Every children in the wasteland from the DC to the hub has at least some concept of death. True, it could just be one of the Brahmins on their ranch getting killed by a wild dog, but more often than not they end up having to defend themselves against raiders. I'll be honest, I was a little jealous. Who knows how we would have turned out if we'd been born and raised in a place like Equestria. Twilight was just glad to be out of those caves. No doubt in her mind now, they would definitely be the setting of the next nightmare or 10 she would have. She was just glad though that they have gotten the fillies out safe. She then turned to the courier. "I'm glad that's over." The courier, who had just taken off his helmet, stared at her in shock. Then he placed a palm on his hand on his face. "You did not just say that," he groaned. "Miss Twilight, what's wrong with the alien?" the apple bloom asked, looking at the human curiously. Sweetie Belle was a little too scared to look at his face, instead taking note of its odd apparel. Scootaloo, being Scootaloo, was looking at him in awe. "I don't know," the unicorn replied. "Mr. Courier, is something wrong?" He shook his head before replying. No, he sighed. "Just trying to remember which is stronger, whiskey or absinthe." "Absinthe," Twilight shot out without thought. "And how is that relevant to anything?" she asked, her brain catching up to her mouth. "Because I need a really strong drink," he replied angrily, still being vague enough to confuse Twilight. We got back to town, again, me using a stealth boy. Hey, the last thing I needed was a complete freakout by the locals. Besides, how do you think they react to you? No offense, but, well, yeah. We got back to the library, and I was told to go inside and wait. Twilight wanted to take the girls back to their families. At the time, I didn't think of much of it. After all, I had just saved their 3 children from a fate worse than death. So I went in, sat on the ground, and waited with a bottle of absinthe. Halfway through the bottle, I realized that the 2 ponies Twilight had sent to get help never did anything of the sort. I was a little drunk, so I didn't understand just how significant this was. I know, stupid. Twilight was back soon enough, said the families were just happy the girls were safe. Couldn't ask for more except maybe some sort of self-defense training, then someone knocking on their door. When she opened it, I'm not proud of what happened next. I'll admit that, honestly though, that's why I'm not taking you to Jacobstown. No, taking you to Jacobstown. You react just like I did. Doesn't help that I was more than a little drunk. And so, on my 5th or 6th day there, no idea which it was, I got kicked in the head by a member of the Royal Guard and arrested for assault. I wasn't awake for the arrest, mind you. I got told that happened later. Author's note. Can anyone guess why he tried to hit a guard pony? And what's this about the person he's talking to?